morning.
Good morning.
Uh, it is 9 a.m. and this is the Physical Therapy Board of California. Meeting today's date is December 6th, and we will now have our call to order at 9 a.m. And now we're ready for roll call.
Okay. Tanya McMillan,
Present.
Dale Armstrong. Dale Armstrong is absent. Karen Brandon,
Present.
Katarina Ellaby,
Present.
Samuel Q,
Present.
Alicia Rubina Amen.
Here.
We have 5 members present, so the board has a quorum.
Thank you. Now we'll have the reading of the board's mission statement by Alicia.
The mission statement of the Physical Therapy Board of California is to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act.
Thank you, Alicia. Moving on to item number 4 on today's agenda, our strategic planning session. And who's leading that?
Today is a little bit different than a typical board meeting.
Thank you.
The first day of this 3-day meeting will include our strategic planning session, and we have trainers from the Department of Consumer Affairs Solid Team who's going to facilitate our strategic planning session today, and I will let them introduce themselves and hand it to them. We are in a work group session now.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Physical Therapy Board Strategic Planning Session. My name is Sarah Irani. I am the lead facilitator for this workshop, and I also have my co-facilitator. I'm Ann Fisher. And our role today for this workshop, we're going to be a neutral party and providing structure for a discussion today. We'll also be documenting the discussion, checking for any understanding, and then while we're typing up notes and everything, we're gonna we're gonna clean up any spelling or grammar errors later. I don't know why that keeps popping up on there. We're gonna clean up any spelling and grammar errors later, just because this is a rough draft and just brainstorming, and we want to make sure that we get everything done today. So we're gonna focus on that. We're gonna focus less on that stuff. And I believe at this point, Michael Kenneth had something to add.
Oh, yeah. So Michael Kenotes, legal counsel. So my role today is I generally don't participate in sort of the planning part. I allow you to do that. This is the board strategic plan. But if any point you have questions about legal issues that arise, or if I spot something, I will jump in on that. So don't hesitate to call on me if you'd like my thoughts.
Thank you.
All right. So some expectations from you all as a group. We do ask you to try to minimize any distractions. Put your phone on silence. Respect one another's contributions. And we do ask that everyone try to participate during the brainstorming part. And for the last part, reach consensus. Sometimes with other boards and bureaus, there can be some conflicting ideas, or people are not happy with what other people come up with. And so we ask that, can you try to, get to a point where, can we live with this? And if it's yes, then we'll move on. And then if there's any stuff that we need to do, we can do that offline. But we want to get to that reach of consensus. So to go over a couple things for our agenda today, we're going to review the current mission, vision, and values, and then do any tweaks if needed. We have a couple DEI videos for you. These are going to be part of your DEI training. One of them is about 20 minutes, and the other one is only 2. So
Try to clear your Teams alert at the bottom.
My name is Lisa Bacon, Training Manager with the Department of Consumer Affairs Solid Training and Planning Solutions team. I'm excited to bring today's training video about diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI, to all of you. My training experience in DEI goes back to 2015 across multiple departments, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to support DCA's DEI efforts. What does DEI mean? That's the title of today's training video and is truly reflective of what we will cover. The training content was collaboratively built using resources, research, and training with the goal to further our understanding of this important topic. This training video will provide a foundation of the general concepts, understanding, and importance of DEI. The Solid team is honored and excited to be a part of DCA's DEI initiatives, and we will continue to expand our commitment to DEI through both training and learning. I'm also proud to share this year, every Solid trainer will be DEI certified, and more DEI trainings are on the horizon. I expect this will only be the beginning of exciting things to come for DCA. So now, let's get into it. What does DEI mean? Our learning objectives for this training will be to understand what diversity means and who it relates to, why it's necessary to choose equity versus equality. We'll discuss the benefits reflected in our work culture when we practice inclusion, and I'll share several examples of how to integrate DEI. I think it's important to mention this training's alignment with our mission statement, which is to advance a diverse, equitable, and inclusive California Department of Consumer Affairs for all. To understand diversity, we first need to define what it means. Diversity is all the characteristics and experiences which define each of us as individuals and the groups to which we belong. Often there's a mindset which associates diversity with only individuals who fall under the protected classes. Diversity is relevant and inclusive of every human being based on each aspect of our lives. We're multi-dimensional beings, which makes us diversely unique. Race and ethnicity are frequently misunderstood. People don't always recognize or identify themselves with one simplistic and usually limited category listed on a demographic questionnaire. To shed some light on this, here are the definitions. Race is biological and refers to groups of people often based on physical characteristics such as the color of their skin. Ethnicity is a broader term than race, and it's your cultural identity. It's chosen or learned from your culture and family experiences, such as a certain custom, traditions, and languages you've been exposed to within the group you feel you belong. Someone might say their race is Black, yet they associate their ethnicity with Portuguese. Or another person might say their race is white and their ethnicity is Irish. I'm a fan of this diversity iceberg because I feel it's a good representation of human diversity. Above the waterline, we can only see about 20 to 30% of an iceberg. The other 70 to 80% is below the surface. When we first interact with someone, there are features we can quickly identify in a short amount of time, such as their body language, an accent when they speak, possibly their gender, and how they're dressed. But these only represent very limited and sometimes inaccurate characteristics of the person. There are numerous layers and dimensions to who we really are, such as our education, sexual orientation, work ethic, strengths, life experiences, and personality traits. And it's impossible to identify these core attributes within a person until we've invested the time to find out. And this is when unconscious bias comes into play, above the surface, when our brains quickly respond to a person or group of people simply based on limited external perceptions. Our brain is biologically wired to rapidly intake information all around us to determine our safety. It's the mechanism which activates our fight or flight response. This is also known as implicit bias. It's an unconscious response and inherent to all humans. We're exposed to influences from an early age based on our environment. our family, education from schools, community, television, movies, marketing, and one of the most powerful influences in our culture today is social media. Because of these unconscious influences, our brains begin to form stereotypes about the society around us. People who look or act a certain way are categorized in our minds based on these mental intakes. Have you ever had that gut feeling when you've been around someone for 5 seconds? It's important to listen to our intuition, but this becomes a problem when we have a strong reaction to someone based on very limited information. We want to trust that feeling and sometimes revere it as a superpower, but we need to make sure we pause and ask ourselves truthfully, what prompted those feelings? This is why unconscious bias tends to have a negative connotation. It is how our brains work, but we have to hold ourselves accountable for how we respond, especially when it's based on an unfair judgment. If we're brave enough to ask and listen to how we've impacted the people around us, we can become more aware of our own biases and reprogram our brain's response system. Viktor Frankl says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. Now I want to talk about the E in DEI and the difference between equality versus equity. Equality happens when we provide the same equal treatment to everyone, and it can feel fair. When we choose to give equity, we create pathways to equal outcomes by recognizing that some people and communities have unequal starting points. This picture reflects what it looks like when we give everyone equal resources. Our intentions may be good, but when we check in and ask people how they're doing, we'll find out not everyone was able to participate. If we check in with people first and find out what they need, it levels the playing field for everyone to succeed. Equality is often related to what most of us know as the golden rule. Treat others the way that you want to be treated. But what you need to succeed can look very different from the people around you. Equity is a verb and a choice. We should all practice the platinum equity rule, which is ask people what they need, then choose to give it so they feel respected. We all deserve respect. Aretha Franklin sang it best. RESPECT, find out what it means to me. I love this quote from Maya Angelou. She says, I've learned that people will forget what you said. People will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And this is when inclusion comes in. Inclusion is the practice it takes to create a positive work environment where the differences of every team member is recognized, understood, and valued. Inclusion is about building trust within our working relationships. One attempt isn't going to automatically change everything, and it's not always easy because we don't automatically know what everyone needs or how people prefer to engage. Inclusion takes time and practice. The key is we need to be curious, ask, listen, and invite the people you serve to provide input. Don't just ask for their feedback after the project is said and done. Give everyone involved a voice and a seat at the table. When we practice inclusion, it lifts morale. Retention increases because people like coming to work. When people feel valued and heard, they're innovative, which inspires collaboration within teams, and DCA becomes a destination employer. Simon Sinek believes the role of a leader is not to come up with all the great ideas. The role of a leader is to create an environment in which great ideas can happen. How can we create inclusive engagement? Hold meetings regularly, then give people options for how to communicate and provide input. In work groups, extroverts tend to speak up and sometimes dominate conversations. If an introvert or analytical person who needs a little more time to problem solve isn't given an opportunity, great ideas and insight can be lost. Groupthink, also known as conformity bias, can quickly contaminate a group when everyone's voice isn't heard and understood. When a special assignment or project is given, Make sure the goals and expectations are clear. Give everyone on the team an opportunity to learn and grow from a special assignment. Create a mentoring opportunity by pairing someone more experienced with someone who's new to the project. This knowledge transfer is ideal for succession planning. There is a DEI section in the Strategic Planning Environmental Scan. It will centralize input on DEI matters and contain demographic information collected. This section can help further inform the board as it considers impacts of policy decision. Our mission is to provide outstanding support services, oversight, and innovative solutions to boards and bureaus that regulate California professionals and vocations so that through this partnership, all Californians are informed, empowered, and protected. Our vision, together protecting California consumers. Our values, accountability, communication, diversity, employees, integrity, leadership, service, and transparency. As a board, you should ensure that your mission, vision, and values supports change and evolves to meet the needs of all Californians. We want all Californians to feel accepted in seeking services we provide. As board members, you are the leaders of the industry you regulate. In this next section, we will discuss actionable areas to incorporate DEI in 4 areas: policy, licensing, enforcement, and outreach. In policy, we need to ask ourselves if the decisions we are considering will lead to the success of everyone involved. Reflect on who will benefit from or be burdened by the proposal or decision being considered. Are the needs of one demographic different from another geographic group? Think equity. What data or metrics will you use to evaluate the impacts of your decisions? Leverage methods that increase public input and engagement, such as workshops, surveys, and multilingual communications. Actively engage with diverse and underserved communities. Reach out to associations, colleges, interested parties, other licensing or regulatory bodies. Utilize the strategic planning process. Review information collected through the new environmental scans, which incorporate DEI questions. In licensing, when licensees reflect communities they serve, it expands access to all. Use plain language. Simplify communication so it's easy to understand and complete. Expand multilingual resources for applicants and consumers. Consider additional pathways to gain experience and/or education for licensure. Expand outreach for subject matter experts to ensure the exam development process is inclusive. When it comes to enforcement, drive fair outcomes and protect the vulnerable. Review enforcement data and trends. Update enforcement policies, processes, and procedures to mitigate unintended consequences to impacted populations through increased engagement with consumers, stakeholders, and communities. When you build your team, consider the needs of all the communities we serve. Do you need more bilingual staff? Do you need additional staff in certain areas of the state? Expand your outreach through HR, job fairs, and inquire about other opportunities you may not have considered before. As you begin to integrate DEI, remember you can't take the bias from the person, but you can remove the bias from the process. Through outreach, you can increase access and opportunity when you reach and meet people where they're at. Do you know what the second most common language in California is? Spanish. So when you translate resource materials based on the people you serve, you expand language access. Develop multilingual communications for social media posts, applications, forms, and other resources you provide. Publish written and video testimonials from your diverse consumers, which reflect their age, race, gender, and cultural differences. As you begin to integrate DEI, remember to leverage all the resources available to you at DCA. The Equal Employment Opportunity Office administers the American Sign Language and Real-Time Captioning Services contract. The EEO office conducts the department-wide language survey to identify the public it serves, the languages spoken, and the bilingual resources available at DCA to ensure equal access is provided for all consumers. The Consumer Information Center administers a contract that provides phone language services to consumers in over 200 languages. The Office of Human Resources administers the bilingual pay program, including the establishment of bilingual positions. The Office of Publications, Design, and Editing coordinates requests for the translation of written materials. The Solid Training and Planning Solutions offers DEI-related trainings, surveys, meeting facilitation, and development of strategic plans. The Office of Professional Examination Services offers examination translation and adaptation services. I want to share one of the many examples of how the Board of Barbering and Cosmetology has integrated DEI.
The California Board of Barbering and Cosmetology celebrates the ever-changing diversity of California's consumers and licensees, so we can establish a quorum, which is why the board has made a concerted effort to expand on its language accessibility. Here are some of our achievements. Upon request, each individual that visits the board in person is given the opportunity to access an interpreter via the language line phone service if the individual does not feel they are able to effectively communicate with board staff. Let's take a look.
Good morning. How can I help you? Okay. Is there another language that you prefer? Do you see one on this list? Okay.
A unit within the Department of Consumer Affairs called the Consumer Information Center, or CIC, provides phone agents who assist consumers and licensees in English, Spanish, and more than 240 other languages, with the assistance of a third-party vendor via the toll-free number 1-800-952-5210. Phone agents usually serve as the public's first point of contact. They provide many services to both consumers and licensees. CIC phone agents answer nearly 1 million calls per year. The board provides 3 additional language access pages in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean languages on its website, www.barbercosmo.ca.gov. The English homepage has the option for Google Translate. Almost every publication, form, bulletin, and trifold the board provides is translated into Spanish, Vietnamese, and Korean. Items such as the self-inspection worksheet and the What to Expect When You're Inspected trifold are available in these languages. Select videos such as foot spa cleaning and disinfecting have been translated into the Vietnamese language and posted to the board's website.
Hi, my name is Kai with the State Board. I'm here to do an inspection.
When inspecting salons with Vietnamese-speaking individuals where violations have been found, inspectors utilize a translated violation cover sheet, which contains a simplified, translated explanation of select common violations. Citations that are issued to nail salons are provided in both the English and Vietnamese languages to the establishment owner. Board inspectors, exam site staff, and headquarters staff receive updated, specialized training on how to utilize an interpreter via the language line phone service to address language access situations found in their respective job roles. Interpreters are provided free of charge to petitioners in disciplinary review hearings upon request, so that each licensee can fully understand their hearing and the additional information provided at the hearing. The California Board of Barbering and Cosmetology is dedicated to providing all individuals with meaningful access to the board's services, programs, and activities. We are working hard to expand our language access and will continue to do so.
When we think about DEI, remember diversity is a fact, equity is a choice, inclusion is an action, and the outcome is belonging. UC Berkeley's Others and Belonging Institute states, belonging describes values and practices where no person is left out of the circle of concern. Belonging means more than having just access. It means having a meaningful voice and the opportunity to participate. We need to make sure our efforts aren't just transactional. They need to be transformative, and it will take time. So remember, DEI is a journey, not a destination.
state director can really fix that error.
In 2022, Governor Newsom issued an executive order directing state agencies and departments to build upon the state's efforts to advance equity by taking new concrete actions to address disparities and expand opportunity for all Californians. The governor's executive order builds upon and strengthens the state's commitment to a California for all. We all have an important role in this effort. As you develop your board's strategic plan, building in and embedding diversity, equity, and inclusion into the goals and objectives is one of the most effective ways we can make progress and produce results with long-lasting impacts. The work that the boards and bureaus do touches the lives of every Californian. That is why it is so important to take into account every Californian when building out the board's mission, vision, values, and goals. The department's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee and the SOLID team are available as a resource to help you in meeting those goals. Thank you for being a part of making our department a diverse, equitable, and inclusive California Department of Consumer Affairs for all.
Might be able to be heard more clearly. Maybe. I don't know if it's actually picking me up. It is picking me up? Great. Okay. All right. So we're going to play a little activity.
Before we start,
Sure.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I am one who I'm so tired of hearing DEI, DEI, DEI. Like it's the buzzword, and most of the time the people that are saying it really aren't talking about DEI.
Mhm.
But this is the best breakdown that I have seen by far. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome. I'm very glad. I'll have to let our training manager, Lisa Bacon, know. All right. So we're gonna do a little activity real quick on to kind of get everyone started. So Anne's gonna pass out a little sheet, and if you've played this game before, try not to tell your neighbor about it or pretend you don't know how it works. All right. So we have some numbers on a page there. And let me actually, what you're gonna do is you're going to, with like the tip of your pen, or if you have something, you're gonna find the number 1. And then you're gonna find the number 2. Then you're gonna find number 3. And then you're just gonna keep going. And to add a little bit of competitiveness to this, we're gonna give you a timer of 30 seconds. All right? So, we're gonna start. Do you have the timer already? Oh, okay, great. Mine wants to do 30 minutes, apparently. Everyone's gonna find everything. All right. So at the count of 1, 3, 2, 1, go ahead and get started. All right, and time. All right, what was the highest number people got? 5? 18, okay. Any higher than 18? No? All right. What if I told you there was a strategy to this little game that we have. So, you want to pass these ones out? All right. So the number, oh, it actually doesn't show up there. The laser pointer. The number 1 is in the 1 box there. 2 is in the 2 box. 3 is in the 3 box. And then it keeps going until you go to 9. And when you get to 10, it goes back up. So there's a little strategy to this game. So now that you kind of know the hint, we're going to give you another 30 seconds. And we're going to see what's the highest number you can get with the strategy in place. All right, so is everyone ready? All right, 3, 2, 1, go. All right, and time. What's the highest number that you got to this time? 27? 36? Good. All right. 28? Yeah. There we go. Aha. Okay, so there was a purpose to that. When you started and you didn't really have kind of an idea of what you were doing, it was a lot more difficult and you didn't get as far as you'd like. However, you had a strategy in place, kind of like a strategic plan. You were able to get further in your goal of, finding as many numbers as you can. So it's a little fun activity that we like to tie with strategic planning because it's a little analogy. So now we're going to kind of talk about why we're going to be creating our strategic plan today. Just get rid of those clickers. Yeah, just not working today apparently. So the strategic planning process answers a couple questions. Where are we now? Where are we going? And how will we get there? And these are kind of answered by, so the where are we now is answered by your mission and values, and the environmental scan, which you should have in front of you, or you should have looked at it prior to today's meeting. The where are we going is answered by your vision and your goals and objectives. And then the how will we get there is answered by the action plan. I'll go a little bit into more details with these in the next couple slides. Yeah, you know what? This pointer is not working for me, so here we go. All right. So this is the board's current mission statement: to advance and protect the interests of the people of California by the effective administration of the Physical Therapy Practice Act. And are there any changes that we want to make to this mission statement today, or do we like how it's currently written?
I'm biased because I've been hearing this now for 5 years, this mission statement, but looking at it again with fresh eyes, I do like the word advance the interests of the people of California, and I like protect the interests. I like both of those. At the same time, I'm very interested to hear, and I'm open to what others, especially new members, might think about the mission statement and how we might improve it.
I think it's simple in its nature. I think it's really important to be simple and make sure it's comprehensive in all that we do. I think that for the average person, some of the specifics might have to be defined, right? What are the interests of the people? what does it mean to advance? How are we different from the California PT Association in terms of that? How do we advance it? And I think also, is our directive really all about the Physical Therapy Practice Act? I mean, that is what, and if that is all it is, then I think that as it stands, it's clear.
So thinking about your comment, I'm just wondering if we considered changing the word people to consumers. However, would that change the intent? Because when we say people, we're talking about all stakeholders, but our mission really is to protect the consumers of California. So, that doesn't mean we don't take into account all stakeholders, which is what we did in this environmental scan. But that's a consideration, I guess.
I can say that in the last round of strategic planning, when you developed this mission statement, that was a much discussed topic, right? The use of people versus consumer and that kind of thing, because people being more of a broad term intentionally to account for those that have maybe not had contact with physical therapy services, or that the advancement and protection of the interests of just citizens of the state of California, right? Including our licensees, including licensees of other professional licensed practices when we talk about scope infringements and those kind of things. That the use of that word people was very intentful at the time. To Dr. Brandon's point, the confines of the Physical Therapy Practice Act, I think in remembrance, was really about like trying to set the expectation of what the board's authority kind of is the umbrella over, right? And so while we're trying to both advance and protect the interests of the people, there's only certain things that we can do within our authority, but also in the perspective of consumer protection, as opposed to like, what's the difference between a board of physical therapy or a professional association of physical therapy?
The effective administration, the word effective, is it necessary?
I think it's kind of a commitment.
Is that what?
I mean, it's almost, so, that's the authority that you have. How, without being redundant, like how effective are we at doing what we're asked to do? And that goes for all aspects of our mandate, whether it's education to the public or it's the enforcement of the complaint side or processing of applications in a timely manner, those kind of things. How effective are we at doing those?
To Jason's point about including the Physical Therapy Practice Act, as I was going through the environmental scan, a lot of the comments I was reading from stakeholders was about advancing the profession or looking out for physical therapists' interests. And I think by including in our mission statement that our authority is to only administer the Physical Therapy Practice Act, it is what defines us from the professional association. So I'd like to include that or keep that in there.
So it's kind of sounding like we want to keep the mission statement as is.
I would just say one last thing about that to Ms. Ellaby's point is that even in environmental scan, you'd see comments that kind of prove that my staff and I still have a little bit more work to do on the outreach side of things, because the comments are coming from a point of confusion, right? They're saying the comments are saying what is the board doing about certain things that really that should be steered towards the professional association, because it's really heavy on the advocacy side of the profession and not so much the advocacy of the consumer side of it. So I think that'll just be, we'll cover that more when we get to the outreach goal. We've got a lot of good feedback on the mission over the last few years. Concise, to the point.
Can I state, when looking at a couple other mission statements of other groups, and I tried not to look at it until after we reviewed this, but, and in light of being exposed currently to DEI principles, is there anything that we can do to show people in our mission statement, whether it's all people or whether it's objective? We intend to advance and protect the interests of the people of California, or all people of California, by effective and objective administration. I mean, I don't know, because I think of I'm happy and proud. I see in reviewing the scan about the fairness, what I saw in terms of integrity. You know what I mean? And I don't know if it's useful to put here. We could talk about it in the objectives, but I don't know. I just wanted to consider. We don't need to make it longer.
Well, no, longer's, yeah. Longer's not always better.
Does it even need to be stated?
Well, I think that was I would say that maybe we were a little ahead of our time, right? Like that generalized, that broader term of just people, I would say was more inclusive than, as an example, if we had used the term consumer, right? That we wanted to make sure that we were fulfilling our mandate and providing the services to everyone in a very inclusive way. And I think you should have reviewed as many mission statements as you wanted to before you came in. If anything, I think I've read more than my fair share of them. And sometimes I just don't know what they mean.
I'm trying to remember, is the next task to create a value statement? Do we have a value statement?
Yes,
A vision
Sounds
statement.
more like a value statement to me.
to have objective as values, as part of your values.
To be objective about the administration. Yeah.
When we get there, I'm going to write myself a note so we remember that. All right, but as is right now, we like our mission statement. Yeah? All right. We love it when there's no changes. Makes things easy for me.
What's the last time?
All right. And as Michael kind of hinted at earlier, now next we have our values, and this is what is important to the board. And we have a couple here: commitment, consumer protection, innovation, integrity, leadership, and service. It sounds like we kind of want to add something that adds objectiveness in there, maybe fairness. Yeah, we do have integrity.
Perhaps equity.
That covers it, I think.
Do you want diversity, equity, and inclusion, or do you just want equity?
I feel like that's a great umbrella term.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's the outcome of being diverse and honoring differences and being inclusive, is that our goal is that there's equitable outcome, yeah.
I'm gonna highlight that one so we know that that one was a new one that was added. Did we want to make any other changes to the other values at all, or do we like those ones as is?
Commitment's a little vague to me.
Mhm.
What are we
Okay.
committed to?
I know, I think integrity is your intention to serve the cause or the responsibility, right? So I think
There may be
it's slightly
some
different.
there may be some conversation in sequence. While we might still hold the same values, we might weight them differently.
I also wonder if there's a connection between innovation and leadership.
I certainly think there is. I like the word innovation more than I like the word leadership.
I agree.
Do we want to take out leadership then?
I think we still get there. And that's the other thing is I think similar to the mission statement being too long, you can state too many values when you, especially when they're overlapping and somewhat redundant. But
When we talk about services, we're talking about quality of services we're trying to address, or we're trying to ensure the, you know, the way the services or the means of services are carried out.
trying to recall when the last time we had a strategic planning session, there was, it was pre-pandemic, which was a whole different world really when you think about it at that point. There was some press about professional licensure in general, like when we talk about the North Carolina decision and those kind of things, and even delays in application services and those kind of things, where I think we emphasize service in the sense that, kind of like with commitment too, right? I mean, we were essentially trying to relay through our value statement that we were here for our applicants, we were here for our licensees, we were here for our consumers, and so I think service and commitment at the time were very appropriate words. Not that they're not now, but I mean they had more weight at the time because of what the world we were in.
But I think that what Sam is saying is that service sounds like you can determine how it's being done, and quality is how we want it to be done.
Yeah.
And based on our scan, and the fact that we do poll our stakeholders, they indicate by their comments that we can improve in certain areas.
Sure.
We are doing the service. It's how we're doing the service, and maybe that's the value. We want to do quality service. I don't know if that needs to be 2 words or,
If this helps, I have a list of values that other. Since we're not doing the full mission, vision, values workshop, I had this slide hidden, but these are some values that you can use. Let's see, what works good for service? Yeah, we have quality here, maybe professionalism. Yeah, excellence is another one.
Yeah, excellence and efficiency are kind of the two that are standing up for that. For me. I'm always, and I will say, in a sports term, commitment to excellence. Knock on wood if you're with me. I hesitate to use that for that purpose, right? Like excellence is certainly a goal to aspire to. To be so bold as to put it as one of your value statements, right? It's kind of, it can miss the mark. You know?
I would say that personally, I'm a very service-minded person. And I think as a board and as staff, public, board members, what do we think of? What are we doing? Are we serving? Is that part of our value? Is that what we're doing? And personally, I'm biased, I would say yes. So I do like the word service.
I would echo that and certainly say at the level of board membership, you definitely are serving. That's your role. I would also say, just from pride of my own staff, that culturally, I would think that that's how we see things too. When you have that opportunity to serve your applicant, when you have that opportunity to serve your licensee, that we do anything that we can, you know, to achieve that mandate. So I like the word service too. I also think that service kind of falls into alignment with that general mandate of consumer protection, in the sense that you often see to protect and serve when it comes to like a law enforcement aspect. And we are an administrative law enforcement agency, right? We are that layer between the consumer and that professional licensee. So I think service for me can hold so many different definitions. It depends on which stakeholder we're talking about.
And I'm glad you brought up stakeholder, because I'm thinking, what is the perception that we want our stakeholders to have of us? Do we want them to see, wow, that's great service that they're giving? But I don't want this to be a buzzword that we just put on, a paper. Yeah.
What I'm thinking about LAPD says protect and serve, right? So maybe 2 words instead of consumer. I mean, on the mission we say people. So do we want to narrow it down to consumer?
I have witnessed a number of debate of strategic plan for multiple boards and bureaus when it comes to this issue of including consumer protection as a value, right? That's essentially the gist of the argument, is how do you say that consumer protection is a value? As the administrator, I would argue that it clearly is a value, right? If we think that this is a worthy mandate, is our pure existence, and we value it, then it certainly belongs on this list. And I think those 2 words together for us should always go together, right? Consumer protection, while we are serving the people, the citizens of the state of California, and I would even say outside of that, we've had examples where we work with other states and larger groups on a national level. But I like the people term, but when we have to narrow it down, the must-have, the absolute that we have to do, is the consumer protection element.
I just wanted to see if we could add respect as a value. Okay.
Oh, I was just looking up service, trying to figure out. So service, it says, is functioning and the occupation of other people's welfare. I think that definitely defines the role of the board. So I think it makes sense to keep that, and then later on define how we accomplish that.
I'd certainly say that, as an example, like integrity. If we remove the integrity from the values, I would hope that it's an inference at that point also, right? Like there are certain words, like that list is just so long that Solid's providing for us as examples. So some of them I would think, speak louder through our actions than us printing them on a page that says values. This is an opportunity for us to say, again, through sequence and priority, what is the most important for us? Like innovation as an example, at the time, innovation was big for us. We were going through Breeze and change of technology, and we wanted to, kind of push ourselves forward and say, we realize that there is a whole lot of room to, move. I would still say there's a whole lot of room, especially with innovation. And we kind of take a Kaizen approach to that anyway in everything that we do. So is it even, do we need to state it anymore? Or is it just part of our reputation at that point?
And can you remind me how the values will drive our strategic plan? Are we going to list things that we are really going to pinpoint as part of our objectives with these values?
So your values are something that you kind of want to keep in mind as what's important to the board when coming up with your strategic plan. You're basically saying like, this is what is important to us and what we, value as an entity.
As an example, as it related to the last strategic plan,
Yep.
if you go through the goals, we talked about
Yeah.
the modernization and the innovation that we wanted to obtain in each and every goal. And again, I think that's, it's repetitive. I think we're still going to do that, but maybe it's not as much of an emphasis in this plan as it was last time. But in consideration of when we get to those goals, to Sarah's point, we have to keep all of the values in mind, like in our efforts of these goals and drawing objectives, and then kind of the map on how to achieve all those objectives. Are we hitting all those values that we stated in the beginning?
So these three that we added here that I highlighted, you have 7 total, which is good. Most boards and bureaus either have between 5 to 7. Once we get a little bit more than 7, it becomes, too much. So we can leave these as they are if we like these additions and the ones that we decided maybe not so much, or if we want to keep workshopping this, we can.
I'm looking at it, and I guess the only recommendation I might make is with the new 7, and this is going to sound weird, but they almost flow well if they were in alphabetical order. Because it happens to work.
Does it make an acronym?
No?
Just
Get that far.
That'd be fun.
I know Osteo was very excited because I guess their previous one spelled out chip dip. I can't recall if their current one still kept the acronym or not, but
Let's see what it looks like.
While that's happening, can I ask a question of the board? I had a question about leadership, because I know and it could change, but the vision is to be the standard of consumer protection for physical therapy, or to be the standard of consumer protection. And so I'm just kind of, how does that play? I feel like, and leadership is an important part of that. And I know the discussion was kind of leadership tied to innovation, but sometimes leadership might be seen as not innovative. And so I'm thinking leadership is an important part. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up as how that ties into the vision. Just a thought.
What if we had 8?
out of 8, 8's fine. So we can keep
So who are we leading in your thoughts? Are we leading other boards? Are we leading in California how to do this well with the group that we have? Are we leading
Yes.
internally?
In every direction.
Okay.
So like nationally, in other boards.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
all of that.
demonstrate to be a model.
Yes.
I see.
And I could see it under excellence, if that wanted to, if that could work too.
No, those are different.
Ms. Ronnie, does the vision come next?
Yes, so
Okay.
we'll be working
In
on
the
the
drill? Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would also say that even like the idea of the vision that Sarah's talking about with the standard of consumer protection is excellence also, but the leadership part of it is like kind of the utilization of best practices at all time, right? Like looking and having a very clear North Star but I think that's integrity as well. So I think it's all covered there.
So just to double check, did we want to still keep leadership or do we want to remove it?
Can we keep the list and come back to this?
Yeah.
Mhm.
This is something that, we can work on offline. So.
Well, not offline, but
Oh.
maybe at the end of our session.
Oh, at the
come
end?
back.
Sure, yeah, we can come back to that. Hopefully we have time.
Just revisit it.
All right. Okay, and then, so that last part of the where are we now, this is also your environmental scan. This is the participation numbers. We had 362 external stakeholders respond to the survey, and then we had 27 people as far as internal stakeholders, and that counts as board members, board leadership, and also board staff. For a total of 389.
Was DCA invited to participate or no?
Like the executive team?
Yeah, or anyone else?
I don't know if they got the survey. I know, what was it? We had Dio.
Yeah, they're often
Dag.
invited. In practice, I think they are busier than, because, with the 36 boards and bureaus, they can't take everyone's survey every time. I don't think we get a lot of that back.
We did include them in the list though. So we included DCA exec, the Division of Investigation,
Okay.
the Attorney General's office.
So if you go to page 37 of your environmental scan, there is a breakdown of everyone who was included. For the external stakeholders, 37 of them listed themselves as part of a government agency. And then for the other category, if they mark themselves that, we have a Division of Investigation investigator, Deputy Attorney General, and that's about as far as
What page was that again?
page 37.
I know. Did it change?
It's in the back page.
Yeah, this is Appendix B, data collection method.
So this is obviously a sample of convenience, but how many licensees do we have? Like, wow,
300, yeah.
wow.
309 people marked themselves as a licensee on the survey
Wow.
of those who answered.
That's
Um,
crazy.
So what was considered external stakeholders? Because as I was going through the scan and looking at the comments, I understood who internal were. I didn't, is it only licensees?
No.
I mean, consumers.
No.
So
This
who is
is,
considered external?
well, most external stakeholders are usually the licensees, but consumers are a part of those external stakeholders as well. For this board and then also most boards and bureaus, it usually ends up being a large population of licensees answering the survey. Because it typically, and this is thing that a lot of other boards and bureaus have problems with is reaching out to consumers and being able to contact them to, hey, answer a survey. Because not all consumers are usually, coming to the board's website. They usually only come to the board's website when they have a complaint. So there are a few consumers on here. It looks like 4 of them responded that they were consumers, but most of the external stakeholder population is going to be your licensees or people who are working to get their license.
Okay, so licensees and consumers, and what
Would-
about educational school association groups?
Those are also
Yeah,
considered
it'd be
external
it would be
stakeholders.
anything other than board staff or board members.
Got it.
really,
Yeah.
at that point.
Yeah.
Okay, that helps. So leadership is internal.
Yes.
Correct.
And staff and board members. Thank you.
How would the service send out?
If I can remember, let's see. I think it's also on. So the survey went out on via the listserv and also the board's social media pages,
And,
and on the DCA website and
posted
the
on websites.
and
the listserv is a blast to all the email addresses that we have on file for our licensing population. And so you're talking about, 37,000 emails sent, as well as what we would call just like an external stakeholders list by invitation. So attorney generals that we work with, DCA executive staff that we work with, division of investigations, their leadership, that kind of thing. So, and then kind of a reoccurring campaign at the time on social media, throwing the survey up, hoping that, maybe we would grab some consumer kind of viewpoints in there, and then leaving the points static on our website during the collection time, and as well as DCA's website.
So that means we got like a 1% response rate.
Less than,
Yeah.
I mean, a point something. Did we just e-blast it once?
Yes.
I mean, since we're a consumer protection agency, shouldn't we have a more effective methods of reaching the consumers?
In fact, that's a recommendation from me and staff as one of our goals in outreach is going to highlight that.
Right. I mean, my experience dealing with healthcare industry is that the regulatory agency or the funding agency usually requires a lot of the organizations that provide this type of services actually maintain some type of survey. Maybe that's something that we should be looking at and make an annual collection of it, to probably put some questions in there to help us with this process. I mean, that's just based on my experience.
Well, the data on the consumer is held by the practitioner, right? So how do we get that data to
Yeah.
invite them to participate?
And we're going to have in about an hour or two, we're going to have a brainstorming session about essentially just this topic alone.
Yeah.
So.
Good.
Thanks.
So the second part for strategic planning is the where are we going? This is answered by a couple things. First, the vision statement, and the vision statement for the board is the standard for consumer protection in physical therapy. Do we want to make changes for this vision statement?
Oops. Again, I still like it, but I am very open to some of the new members' thoughts on what they might see differently.
In defense of the vision as a incentive or a motivator for staff, we've used that vision statement to kind of guide us in the way that we interact with our stakeholders and our consumers here in California, but even in our interactions kind of at a national level, right? Where we want to make sure that, you know, I guess portability is probably a good example of, you know, licensure portability for people to move from state to state, that we want to be able to provide a standard for other states to emulate, so that it's kind of a double benefit to us. When they move from another state that may not have as effective requirements through application and licensure or something like that, that they now kind of adhere to those as a best practice, as a proven standard that one of the largest states in the union utilizes, as an example, like a criminal-based background check in the application process or something like that. Here are some of the things that we'd like everybody to do, because it, you know, a rising tide floats all boats, and it will benefit us all if we're all starting to kind of lift up to these same standards. I think it still provides that same incentive and motivation, right? I mean, we have, you're all, as members, you're all familiar with those pressures that we hear about with licensure compact and all of those kind of things that are on the horizons, and they're always asking California, what about this and what about that? And we're just all kind of like, that all sounds really good, but it's still not even at the level that California holds its own licensees to at this point, right? So it's an example of that best practice.
Yes, I would add along those lines, when I think about some of the hot button topics and also potential barriers for licensure, one thing I've experienced myself as a board member is how staff really discerns how to tackle those issues and get around having to conform to whatever is being done nationally, but creating some pathways for results and solutions that aren't necessarily just going with the flow and jumping on board with whatever's the hot topic at the time.
Sometimes the standard doesn't necessarily mean more, right? Sometimes it means removing unnecessary barriers, right? And trying to streamline the process.
I like these words, the idea of results, you know, and I think one thing that came up in the scan, again, I don't want to add extra if it's not necessary, but like the responsiveness, I think that people want responsiveness
Oh, yeah.
from us, and I don't know if that's just,
Yeah.
if we call like the standard is, you know, like excellence, basically this, it's to aspire to. But
I
if we
mean-
consider, if it's already built in, you know, if it's already built into the word standard, then that's fine if people understand that. They could just go back one slide
And find
to
out.
our to our goals.
Right.
and
It's
know
on the value.
that's what we mean.
Societally,
Mhm.
there is a higher expectation of responsiveness, right? Everything is real time. Everything is instantaneous and instantaneous gratification. You can just pull out your phone and apply online to just about anything at this point. And government is always that couple steps behind, you know, takes a little bit more implementation. And reflecting on the survey, and even in some of those comments are kind of, I would put in two categories. Sometimes they were those confused comments because they weren't really talking about us. They were talking about the professional association, right? Because they were like responsiveness in maybe a change in legislation or an expansion of the scope, and what is the board doing about that? Well, that's the other side. That's the professional advocacy side. Versus how often, you know, are we answering the phone or answering emails, or can I get my application for licensure processed in 7 days? You know.
And I have to say right now that the thing that's coming to my mind from a research perspective or stats is this is definitely skewed. When you look at, we have 4 consumers that responded.
Yeah.
What if we are hitting it out of the park already for responsiveness to complaints? We wouldn't know that on a N of 4 on that side.
You might remember at the last meeting, we talked about surveys, and we talked about surveys that we received from consumers, but surveys that we also received from applicants about their experiences. And I didn't know what to do with the responses of the surveys because they were overwhelmingly good, right? They talked about a really good experience, and I want something that has some meat so I can look at the critique side of it and look for, areas to perform and better the performance. The consumer side, and like I said, we're gonna go into a brainstorming session about how we can target consumers better in our outreach. Is always going to be kind of difficult. But to Dr. Brandon's point, we had 4 people identify themselves as consumers. And I will say, the last strategic plan, while we had a larger response rate, the consumer was in about the same proportion, right? Like they're the smallest, hardest group they're the largest group that responds in the smallest fashion.
I was just gonna say, if we put excellence here, we gotta take it out of the other one probably. I feel like maybe that, if it's comfortable for everybody to put it here, because it just seems like we don't have to say it twice. And does it fit better here than on the other side? Does it really define standard any better? Here? Not really?
I will say, in recollection, when you guys crafted this vision, there was kind of a mic drop moment. I mean, it was kind of like,
Standard.
Yes. Yeah.
I think it's strong.
Yeah.
At that point, and it's bold.
I prefer it here and then remove it from values, because I feel like it speaks volumes and it's more realistic as part of the vision.
I agree. Yeah, we're headed towards it. That way we're constantly attempting to get better.
I think maybe we'll keep leadership in the previous slide and then excellence here. Maybe. Because we're talking about leadership as well in the vision, right? Because we wanted to be a leader in terms of the protection side. We are standard setting.
Because how we do it, how we become a standard of
And that's in our
excellence
vision is through
because
leadership and all
respect,
that. Yeah.
equity, integrity. That's
Right.
how we do it.
Right.
I also like the 2 additions in the values. I think they speak to time.
Nice.
So I removed the excellence from the values and then added it here to the original one, and then Anne suggested a different wording of it.
So I have one more bold suggestion.
Mm-hmm.
The standard for excellence in consumer protection.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Mm-hmm.
And drop this one.
It's another mic drop.
Yep. Touche.
Do we like and better, or do we want excellence in consumer protection?
Of excellence.
Okay, so we did that.
Yeah, and
Okay.
think big.
Deal with it.
As funny as it sounds, that's actually one step farther than I was contemplating in this session. I had thought about just changing physical therapy to healthcare.
Mhm.
I like the period.
Yeah. And then we're back to 7 values.
There you go.
Perfect.
Can you dig it?
All right. The other part of where we are going is answered by your goals. And these are your goals here. And we have one addition that we're going to kind of flesh out a little bit more today. And one thing to kind of add about what is the difference between goals and objectives, because a lot of people will use those two terms interchangeably. For strategic planning, they're a little bit different. Your goals are these big areas, they're long-term, they're much more broad, where your objectives, which we're going to kind of brainstorm today, these are going to be kind of tucked under the goals. They're short-term and they're a lot more specific. So that is a difference when we're talking about goals and objectives, which today we'll be brainstorming objectives for each of those goal areas. This is the roadmap for the strategic planning process. Our first step that we did was all the preliminary stuff, and then the second step is the environmental scan, which was doing that survey, doing interviews with the board members and the board leadership, analyzing all that data and putting that into that report that you got a chance to look at. Obviously, that 2 weeks for the planning session is not accurate. We had to wait until this board meeting to do the strategic planning session. But this is where we are today. And what we're going to do is we already refined our mission, vision, and values, but we're going to use that environmental scan to kind of come up and brainstorm what you want to focus on in the next 3 to 5 years as a board. So the environmental scan was used the SWOT analysis, which stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Your strengths and opportunities are things that you kind of want to keep and benefit from, where the weaknesses and threats are areas for improvement, things that you need to fix or avoid. Your strengths and weaknesses are all kind of be internal inside the program, whereas your opportunities and threats are outside the program, external factors that may affect you. So we're mostly going to be focusing on the weaknesses and threats today as we're brainstorming, but we do want to kind of keep our strengths and opportunities in mind while we're coming up with those objectives. And then just some roles and responsibilities. Just a reminder that consumer protection is the mandate for the board, and the strategic direction of the board rests in your hands today. And then staff are going to be responsible for implementing the strategic plan after it's kind of brainstormed today. So you'll want to make sure that you are considering staff availability and time and resources when we're coming up with those objectives. Try not to have them, finish everything in 1 year. All right. So a couple of resources that you'll be using, your expertise as board members. Your objectives workbook, if you got a chance to fill that out ahead of time. If not, that's okay. You can use that today to jot down any notes. Your 2023 environmental scan, and you also kind of want to keep in mind the sunset report from 2021.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We'll take a break here. Yeah, do we want to take a quick 15-minute break before we get started with all the brainstorming?
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Let's get back on board. Here we go. Handing it over to you.
All right. Just to double check, do you have to do roll call again?
No.
Coming back from break? Okay, great. I just wanted to double check. All right. So, for our instructions for brainstorming objectives today, we're going to try to identify 3 to 6 objectives per goal area. And kind of the formula we're going to do this is, what is the issue or topic? Why are we addressing it? How can the board solve or address that issue? And then what is our desired outcome? And the other thing that we want for our objectives is to have them be SMARTY. And there's a printout at each of the tables, so unfortunately you have to share. And SMARTY is an acronym that stands for specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-based, inclusive, and equitable. To kind of go in a little bit more detail, specific means it's going to detail out everything that needs to be done. Measurable, you want to make sure that your objectives can be actually measured for success. Actionable, we want to use action words for objectives. Realistic, something that is possible for staff to do and possible to obtain. Time-based means that it's usually for time-based, it's within the timeline of the strategic plan. Inclusive, you want to make sure you're including all individuals, and equitable, creating pathways for equal outcomes. So we have an example of an objective, and this one's not specific to physical therapy board. This is just a generic one. But this objective here is evaluate and update existing internal enforcement policies and procedures to ensure fair and equitable processes and disciplinary outcomes. So here you can see that our issue or topic is that staff are untrained and they lack clear policies and procedures, which is for SMARTY, that is our specific issue. Why we're addressing it. Inconsistent interpretation and application of laws. How can the board solve this? By mapping their current procedures and writing clear policies. And here, this is, as you can see, this is actionable, realistic, and time-based. Actionable because we have the action word of mapping current procedures and writing. Realistic, that's something that staff can do. And it's time-based because we're doing our current procedures, and that's something that can be done within the time of the strategic plan. For desired outcome, what does the board want out of solving this issue? Clarified policies, trained staff, consistency of, and in interpretation of application of laws. So this is where the measurable, inclusive, and equitable is. You're being inclusive and equitable by having your policies clarified, and there's consistency. And then it's measurable because you can, once you have those policies clarified, you can measure, okay, yes, we measured 1, 2, 3, or we clarified 1, 2, 3 policies. So that's how that works.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I don't quite understand how it's measurable. I know you just stated it, but I'm thinking objective data.
Well, maybe not this, because this one is an example one. This one, for instance, this type of objective, for instance, would be measurable by the number of policies you clarified. But that is something you do want to keep in mind as far as measurable, as far as like actual data, because a lot of times other like programs will be like, oh, we just want to, you know, improve our consumer satisfaction. Okay, but what is that measure of improvement? And how are you, like, what are you actually going to do to track the improvements for consumer satisfaction? So that would be something for measurable.
Okay, and then
Time-based, are we assuming that the time is always within the strategic plan 5-6 year span?
For these objectives, yes, because otherwise it wouldn't be in your strategic plan. So things like you do day to day, you don't want to include in your strategic plan. Like if it's something that's like continue doing XYZ, maybe don't include it, but something that you want done within the length of the strategic plan. If you think it can get done sooner, like in the next year, yeah, you can include that as well.
Mhm. And is there a thought to have one specific objective versus combining two objectives into one objective? Because I see two objectives here. I see evaluate and update. And so you could meet part of it, but then you could not meet the other part, so then you wouldn't meet the goal, or the objective, I mean. But if you split this into two, you might meet one and not meet the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's because it feels like it's two separate objectives, but really it's one, because the issue is that there's inconsistent interpretation of the laws for this example one, correct? It feels a little silly to have one objective be we're going to evaluate, and then the next one be we're going to update, when it can just be kind of we're going to evaluate and update. And you would hope that the evaluation part doesn't take the entirety of the length of your strategic plan to do that.
I will give you an example, though. In the last strategic plan, there was kind of reoccurring theme is where we evaluated the staffing needs for each individual unit. And then as a separate objective, it was establish whatever is the outcome of that evaluation, right? So if we evaluated the needs of a certain unit and we said, okay, based on that assessment, we realized that we were short a certain amount. The next objective was even obtaining that, right? Because it was such a large project in and of itself. And I think it's kind of like we'll have to look at these one by one to kind of determine that.
That's what I was thinking along those lines, because what if you evaluate and you're fine?
Yeah. Well, and then the other one was, and this one's very close to the one that we did in the last strategic plan, where it was, kind of take a look at all of our procedure manuals, create procedure manuals for things we didn't have, but then update procedure manuals for things that we did. So.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on this? All right, so I've done a lot of talking this morning. So for this next part, I'm actually going to pass it over to Anne. We're going to do this throughout the day, where one of us will be kind of facilitating, the other one's typing. So I'm going to take over the scribing role, and I'll pass it over to Anne and mute my mic so we don't.
All right, thank you.
Maybe trade mics. So we can, okay.
You got both, yep. So mic check, okay. So the first goal area that we're gonna talk about today is enforcement. And the definition of what the enforcement unit does is we're protecting consumers through effective enforcement of laws and regulations governing the practice of physical therapy. Just to touch base, does that still sound like a good summary of the goal area and the tasks that we hope we are accomplishing? Seeing some good nodding heads. Okay, great. So one of the things that the survey asked, as you may recall, is to rate how effective the unit is doing, or the board is doing, in enforcement activities. And in general, we got great feedback. The internal, everyone thinks that things are going fine, effective or very effective, and largely the external as well. We very rarely find that every external stakeholder is completely in approval, because that's just the nature of human beings who choose to take a survey. Somebody had something they wanted to express. But in general, these numbers are very good. So I would say that you're starting from a place of strength and confidence. This is a summary slide of some of the weaknesses that external stakeholders did report. Communication, and that includes things like responsiveness, but also things like the simplicity of language presented. It's always a balancing act when you're trying to express legal concepts but still be plain language, so that's going to be a balancing process. high workloads are often a concern. Enhancing the knowledge of the laws and regulations. Some of this often depends on where the person starts their contact with the board. If they have to go through the Consumer Information Center, those people are not as steeped in all the detail, so that might be a reflection of that. Case timelines often goes hand in hand with a high workload, but there are also possibly efficiencies that can be discovered. And then expert consultants, these are people who put together case reviews if you have to go before the Attorney General or anything like that. Do you have a robust pool of well-trained experts who will present successfully reasons why someone's license could be affected by the actions? So as a summary of the external opportunities and threats that people saw out in the outside world, the concept of scope and for dry needling came up, the concepts behind telehealth, the future destiny of an interstate compact, increasing scope of practice issues. Those are things you might want to be aware of and keep your eye on in the next 10 years or so. Things that would count technically as threats, job encroachment. A lot of people have been listing artificial intelligence across all of our boards and bureaus, and I think it's a buzzword that maybe people don't understand as well, but they see this as a societal looming threat, so they wanted to go ahead and express that. Dry needling, again, that's going to talk about scope, unlicensed activity, how to handle it, whether the board has enough resources to tackle that, and then PT mills, and whether that's something that the board is effectively got the tools to work on. So these are the high concepts we're going to be talking about. And so does anybody have any kind of main issue that they would like to start with as far as something that you'd like the board to have on their strategic plan?
I have a question. What's a PT mill?
Sarah might have
I know what a puppy
Question.
mill is, but
It's very similar in
Okay.
nature, right? So it's just the idea that there are too many patients running through a practice to be receiving quality care, right? Or that the supervision ratios are out, treatments are being inappropriately provided by aides or an assistant, and not the quality of care that a PT might provide.
is it there an assumption that it's perhaps due to like a workers' comp claim or like insurance claim? They're trying to increase their billing.
It could, but it
For
could be
somebody's
just that, and that's a good way to put it too, is that maybe it's not the actual the healthcare that's driving it, that it's a financial motive or something else that's driving it.
I had a comment when I was looking at all of these, noting that our external, and now that I understand our sample size better, our external stakeholders pretty consistently demonstrated that we were meeting, I guess, not very satisfied, but satisfied. Where our internal were all mostly very satisfied. So I guess, if our goal, our vision is excellence, et cetera, I want to kind of understand what would very satisfied look like in this group, in the external stakeholders,
I think that.
in enforcement, I guess.
Yeah, for the enforcement side, I think perspective and education is always going to be important, right? So one of the things that kind of goes hand in hand with your enforcement program can move faster, right? And an outcome can be, and updates can be received more frequently and that kind of thing, has to be paired with the education of what that process looks like. That there's an investigation that's occurring and evidence needs to be collected and all those kind of things where it might put it into kind of a practical expectation. Okay, actually, based on timelines and statistics, we're performing very well. But again, there's that societal expectation of like, what's taking so long? I clicked enter and nothing has happened yet.
Yeah.
So for the enforcement side, I think there's two things that we were battling with that when it came to expectations. It was the expectation of licensees wanting to know about their complaint or wanting to know about the subject of the complaint, right?
Okay.
And then also the internal side of it, which is my staff, who are looking at like that cases per analyst caseload, because there's a throughput issue at that point.
So in speaking to the first one, which is the stakeholders external wanting to understand the enforcement process, one idea that I was wondering, a lot of people nowadays, the quick way to educate is infographics.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a possibility of us coming up with infographics as to, this is how bills made, not a cartoon,
Absolutely.
like that, but
Right.
something that would demonstrate, like in a one social media post, the process that it takes, so that people now know A, B, C, D, as simplified as possible, and even maybe the infographic could have the definition of some of the laws and regs, terminology that people do not feel comfortable with if they get that information.
We just participated in a national training where we had to demonstrate our enforcement process. And we have a process map
Good.
Can you cartoonize it?
that we provided as a slide in this training to demonstrate it's too complex to take in a single view, right?